Welcome this week in Missouri Politics on a very busy news week on both sides of the state. We're here joined by a person right in the center of it all, Jeff Roorda, former state legislator, now works with the union and the city police. Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here, Scott.
First of all, how's everything going? How are the cops holding up? It's been a week now. How's the morale? How's the fatigue setting in?
Yeah, this is a long, grueling experience for cops. You know, you've got unseasonably warm September. You've got really heavy defensive equipment that you're sweating. It's heavy. It's not comfortable stuff, but it keeps the cops safe. So we're glad they're wearing it. And it's not militaristic. It's protective gear.
Who cares? I mean, I don't understand. Who cares if it's militaristic if it protects people that are there to protect other folks?
Right, and it's a deterrent too. You know, the fact that they show up in that gear and are ready for trouble shows that they're not going to take any trouble.
But a cop should, if you could keep an officer safe, and he's there to protect people, shouldn't you keep him? Who gives a crap who makes it?
You don't ride your bicycle without a helmet.
Exactly.
I mean, why would you show up at a riot without a helmet? They've got to take a lot of abuse. Horrible things being said to them on the front line, particularly black officers. They get treated worse than anybody in these situations. And then, you've seen the violence against the police, the bricks and bottles being thrown. That first night we had some really serious injuries. These cops have to leave their house and look into their wife's eyes and say, I'll be home safe, honey, when they really don't know if that's going to happen. And their kids are clinging to their legs. These kids know there's something wrong and they don't want mom and dad going to work, and that's a tough situation for these guys to be in.
Let me walk through this. So for the folks that are watching in other parts of the state, there was an officer who had to brandish his weapon and shot a person in the middle of a heroin drug sale. This was tried before a judge, not a jury. The judge wrote a lengthy report basically exonerating the police officer and found him not guilty. The response to many in the black community were that this instance was wrong, and there's a history of things where the police have wronged their communities. What do you do though when you have a rule of law? These are Democratic elected officials appointing judges who you assume are Democratic or at least liberal. This is the result of a system that is generally produced by the political party many of these folks claim to be from. Who do you blame?
Well, you blame the politicians that aren't honest about what happened. Shame on Mayor Crewson and everybody else who's castigated this decision when under the rule of the law there's no question that it's the right decision. Judge Tim Wilson, one of the most venerable judges on the bench, 28 years on the bench, issues a very detailed, well-reasoned verdict that anyone that takes the time to read it would understand why he found Jason Stockley not guilty. And the bottom line is that Jason Stockley went up against a convicted felon who had walked away from parole and had a warrant for parole absconding, who was armed with a gun and carrying heroin. He was going to go back to jail for decades if he didn't escape from Jason Stockley and his partner that day, and that's why he acted with such desperation. That's why he tried to kill the officer.
But the point is, and I've heard other folks talk about how, well, these things shouldn't matter. The point was the judge found that there was no planting of a weapon. This is his opinion.
Right.
And if you don't respect the rule of law in that instance, to me, lobbying a judge or publicly threatening what will happen is not the rule of law. But there is a rule of law issue I want to ask you about while you're here. Driving through St. Louis, people will block the streets. Is it legal to block public streets in the state of Missouri?
Absolutely not. And I've heard this question before, and I'll defend the police chief. And he and I met last night, and we talked about this very issue. What you're giving up in a city setting where there's plenty of streets to get around a situation like this, by letting people congregate in the middle of the street where you can contain them and monitor them, I think it's worth giving up a couple blocks to have that containment and to be able to keep that situation.
What do you say to a guy
control.
trying to get to work? What do you say to a woman trying to get home from work and see her family that loses 2 hours with her family because someone's blocking a public street? What do you say to those people?
Well, take 12th Street instead of 14th Street. Here, I know it's an inconvenience.
Well, if you can choose which laws you're going to enforce, why don't you? What stops you just picking other laws you don't want to enforce? Well, why aren't the police clearing the streets?
Because the alternative is to lock up 400 people, which overwhelms the system, and and then you lose control of the situation. I know
So
that
what's
it's
the next law
aggravating.
that if it's not worth locking up 400 people, you can break?
But these are tactical decisions that are made by commanders on the ground on a case-by-case, very dynamic basis. And I never second-guess these tactical decisions. In fact, I embrace this one. I know it's a bad optic, but I think they did the right thing by giving up a little territory to control the situation.
Here's a couple folks that have offered actually some solutions, not protesting the verdict, but they actually have some ideas that they think would make things better. Kim Gardner, the circuit attorney, former colleague of yours in the legislature, she came in and said, well, we should have a third-party agency investigate when an officer kills someone in the line of duty. What's wrong with that? That seems somewhat reasonable.
Well, we do right now. And guess what? It's her. The police department, we've got Internal Affairs and Force Investigative Unit that both investigate these police shootings. They carry the case over to the prosecutor's office and they say, hey, we don't think there's any criminal wrongdoing here, but we want a second set of eyes on this. And those sit in a drawer over at Kim's office. The officers aren't able to testify in that case because she hasn't cleared them. They've got to take the fifth because they're still under investigation. And now these would-be cop killers are going free.
Does she, you know police work, does she have the staff to actually do that?
Well, she would if she was staffed up, but
So
she's been unable to keep lawyers.
if you already have somebody that who does investigate these, why wouldn't it, if it's not getting done and there's problems with it, the Highway Patrol steps in a rural county when there's a allegation of corruption within a department. The Highway Patrol comes in and investigate. Would the police officers union be opposed to the Highway Patrol investigating these cases?
What we're doing right now isn't working. What would work, we're open to that question. Maybe it's the Attorney General taking a look at these cases. Maybe Kim keeps them, but you get an outside prosecutor in. I mean, what we're doing right now is a natural conflict, and there is no resolution, and it's a problem.
Representative Franks has brought up that the Civilian Review Board locally in the city of St. Louis should have subpoena power. Is that something that can happen at a city level? Can the Board of Aldermen make that happen?
No, they can't. And they didn't put it in the original Civilian Review Board bill because their lawyers told them they couldn't. The state statute that creates the authority for locales to create a Civilian Review Board does not give them the authority to endow them with subpoena power.
So that's a Missouri legislature change. They would have to
Right.
fix at the legislature.
Right.
Is that something the union would support?
Probably not. I mean, you can review these cases without going on a witch hunt. We've made an arrangement. We've given up more than we had to make sure that the Civilian Oversight Board gets enough information to make an intelligent decision, and they're now getting everything in the case file, and that's a big deal. And we gave in a lot to make sure that we didn't get accused of being obstructionist. They don't need subpoena power.
Real quick, let's walk through the leaders here. The governor, I thought he did a great job leading up to this verdict. During the campaign, he promised a curfew, he promised the National Guard, he promised people this wouldn't happen again. Would his campaign promises of a curfew and the National Guard, would it be helpful to police in uniform tonight?
Well, you know, he's activated the National Guard, but they really haven't been deployed in a meaningful way other than protecting the perimeter of the airport, which is important, but we haven't seen any trouble out there. In Ferguson, the National Guard was deployed in a meaningful way, but not soon enough, really. And not fully when
I
we
would
knew
think
the...
business owners that have had their windows broken in would say it hasn't been deployed soon enough here.
You know, we've heard from a lot of frustrated business owners that wish that their property would have been better protected, but...
Would it be better tonight for the officers who are on the front lines to have the governor's campaign promises implemented?
After Friday, we had suggested that a curfew was a very viable strategy, and I advocated for that. It may have made Saturday and Sunday a lot better, but you still have to enforce that curfew. And you can't just say there's a curfew and then not enforce it. So
Let me ask you about the mayor. She's tried to, it sounds like, be almost conciliatory toward people in the streets. What's the relationship right now? I know that you and her have a history of maybe not being the closest. Sometimes you were, sometimes you weren't. Where's that at right now?
she's been a colossal disappointment, a supreme failure in her
Would you
approach
say in
to
her
this.
defense she's in a no-win position? Is there anything she could do that would be praised?
She's put herself in a no-win situation. I mean, she got elected by St. Louisans that thought that she was going to be the strongest on law enforcement among a crowd of candidates who were very, very anti-police in their campaign remarks, and she hasn't delivered on that. And you know, she's trying to please everybody, and as it turns out, she's not pleasing anybody.
Well, let me talk about something that has worked out well. The war on police. Jeff Roorda, former state legislator. The book has worked out. Your book that you wrote about the issues in Ferguson. And the interesting thing to me is how many things in this book now could give you some perspective of the police officer's view of what's happening currently in St. Louis. We appreciate you coming on. You can get this book at Amazon.com or WDKDdaily.net. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel. Peter Merideth is back and Marsha Haefner after this.
I've been in this industry for over 25 years, with the majority of that time here in St. Louis. At Republic Services, this is the community we serve. That's why we built a clean fleet of 130 compressed natural gas trucks. It is also why we recruit the best people and invest millions of dollars in the St. Louis area to continually upgrade our facilities. We value our community and take great pride in keeping the environment clean. Republic Services, we'll handle it from here.
My name is Eric Philippi. I'm a veteran, a carpenter, and a father. When Eric Greitens said he was going to change politics as usual, folks like me didn't think the first thing he'd do as governor was take dead aim at our jobs and our families' livelihoods by working to repeal prevailing wage. Call Governor Greitens. Tell him to protect prevailing wage and to protect my family, not destroy it.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Nobody likes power outages, including us. That's why Ameren, Missouri is investing in new equipment and smarter technology to reduce outages and keep pace with future needs. And it's working. We're in the top 25% in the nation for reliability. And on average, our rates are 18% lower than other Midwestern states. Making sure the power is there when you need it. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to our Opinion Maker panel segment, our Oktoberfest Opinion Maker panel segment, starting with Peter Merideth, Representative. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Stephen Roberts Jr., welcome back to the show, sir.
Glad to be here.
Representative Marsha Haefner from St. Louis, welcome.
Thank you.
And Representative Kathie Conway, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So, Representative Roberts, bring our viewers that may be in different parts of the state that haven't been following this day-to-day like folks in St. Louis have, what's happened and why?
Right, so quick rundown of the case. We have Officer Jason Stockley. He arrives at a Church's Chicken, boxes Anthony Lamar Smith in. He hops out of his car with an AK-47 with a drum magazine, and all this is captured on video. Anthony Lamar Smith drives off. He shoots at him with this department-issued weapon, chases him during the drive. He says, "I'm going to kill him," gets out of his car. Well, first they ram him, then hops out of his car and does just that. When officers recover the gun, they find DNA evidence on it, but the only DNA on it is that of Jason Stockley.
But the officers didn't just happen upon that; they were investigating a crime, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
He claims that he witnessed a suspected hand-to-hand transaction.
So the protests come after the judge's verdict when they find him not guilty. There's a lot of folks that say, well, due process was given. This went through the full court system, and he was found not guilty. What more do you want? So that's a question.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when this case was issued, immediately I saw several red flags. I mean, first of all, it took 6 years for this case to come to trial,
Mm-hmm.
and to me that's just absolutely absurd, and another reason why, an example of why we need independent prosecutors. But more so than that, you've got a situation where, I think I'm a reasonable person. If a police officer were to box me in, get out of his car with an AK-47 with a large drum magazine, he's wearing black gloves, I'd be terrified. I'd be in fear of my life.
I agree. Yeah.
And just to kind of brush over that situation is absurd to me.
Peter Merideth, this past week at the Billy Joel concert in St. Louis, There was a lot of, there was a rally predominantly by white people, white allies they were called. You've been part of the movement to support the protests and what they're doing. What's made you decide to get involved in this?
Well, for one, I think as a white elected official, it's my job to be there listening to what folks have to say. There are a lot of people that are hurt, that are upset. What I'm hearing mostly is that this is a set of facts, whereas, as we're just described, it's hard to imagine a set of facts more clearly showing a planted gun and a suspect that wasn't actually given due process. And so to see a court system that even with that set of facts still can't find a guilty verdict, the question becomes, when can a police officer be held accountable for wrongdoing? I mean, this officer broke very specific rules that he wasn't supposed to carry that gun. He wasn't supposed to fire at a vehicle, a moving vehicle that wasn't firing at him. And even with those facts, it wasn't enough to find a guilty verdict. So people are hurting, people are angry, and people are seeing a system that works for one group of people and not another.
Representative Conway, folks watching the show just heard Jeff Roorda give a very different view of this. It's amazing how two people can watch the same thing and read the same facts and see such different things. Is there a way to bridge those gaps?
Well, I'll tell you, Scott, before I became a representative, I spent 33 years as an investigator, and quite a few of those years were with the St. Louis City Public Defender's Office. So I spent a lot of time in North St. Louis talking to these same people that are protesting now. I think it's discussions. I think that Representative Roberts gave a encapsulation that is his interpretation.
Just like Jeff Roorda did earlier.
Just like Jeff Roorda did, and somewhere in there is the truth.
Sure.
And we have a system that is supposed to be fair and not perfect. And it is the defendant's right to go before a judge instead of a jury, and that's what he chose.
Sure.
So I think it's just conversations, and I think with Representative Haefner and I being able to talk with Representative Merideth and Roberts, I think that's always a good start, and find solutions that way.
Representative Haefner, it is an amazing thing to see these different discrepancies. I don't know that reasonable people could say that African Americans are treated the same in the justice system. I mean, maybe it's just people that have money and don't have money. But I mean, these cases keep happening. There is an honest feeling in the African American community that they're not treated the same as white people are by the criminal justice system. Is there a way to actually make steps to address those concerns? Is it possible to do that?
Well, I think that's what the protesters are the point they're trying to make right now is we need to find that way. Now that we're after Ferguson years down the road, I think a lot of people feel we haven't made a lot of progress. Hopefully, with the spotlight on this case, there will be some real solutions that both law enforcement and citizens think is fair to both sides.
Peter Mayor, the first thing that came up was have independent agencies investigate these shootings. That does not seem out of the norm. In rural counties, when there's a question with the Sheriff's Department, the Highway Patrol comes in and investigates. Should the Highway Patrol be the one that investigates when an officer has to use his weapon?
You know, I'm not actually certain who should be the one. I just think it's clear that it should be somebody other than the same officers that work alongside the person they're investigating.
And even the
Friends
prosecutor.
shouldn't investigate each other.
The prosecutor and the cops normally have a very, very close relationship.
They rely on
They're
each
usually
other
working
heavily.
on the same,
Yeah.
towards the same goals. Is the Highway Patrol the right group to come in and investigate this?
I think the best way and the way you instill trust back into our community is you have a civilian oversight board that has teeth. You know, they need to have subpoena power and the authority to punish and discipline police misconduct when they find it.
Representative Conway, that's something that, according to Jeff Roorda, that has to be done by the state. There's others that say because the statute doesn't prohibit it, the city can do it. In the state legislature, could a bill pass that gives the civilian review board subpoena power?
Oh, I think it could pass, but I think that there's so many questions we need to ask: what their authority is, how they're going to be appointed, who appoints them, how long do they serve, what's their background, dissemination of information that they do subpoena, and just what weight their decisions would carry. Is there an appeal process from the Citizen Review Board? I think that the devil's always in the details, and while on the surface it may look like a great idea, I think that we have to have definite rules and policies in place on how it will be conducted.
Representative Haefner, I viewed you as a strong supporter of law enforcement, your time in the General Assembly. If that, as Jeff Roorda says, the police union says this is a bad idea, we don't want this, can that pass in Jefferson City?
again, as Representative Conway said, it would depend on what that looks like, but transparency is always good, getting the right information out, but law enforcement needs to feel that they are protected from groups that might not want to look at all the facts.
You've said before that this is something because, Jeff Roorda said because it's not in the statute, the civilian review boards that are already constituted can't do this on their own. You're saying because it's not prohibited in the statute, the Board of Aldermen can do it.
Absolutely.
Why don't they?
I think they should, and I hope to see that in the next coming weeks and months that they do that. I mean, I know they took a big step forward this past week with the police body cameras. I think that's another step in the right direction.
Sure. Peter Merideth, you're an attorney. Can you do something if it's not prohibited by the statute?
That would be my understanding, especially for a home rule city. And I would actually go a step further and say if we're talking about what kind of details should be in place for that civilian oversight board, I would leave that discretion to local communities as they're putting theirs together to decide how best to handle it themselves.
Jeff said it used to be a bastion of low control. It is no longer.
It is not.
Give me the prediction, though. Just take your personal views out of it. I'll go first. I believe that in Jefferson City, this would not pass.
I think unless the police are on board with it, it would be very difficult.
Prediction of just does it come out? Do you think?
In Jeff City or Board of
Jeff
Aldermen?
City.
No.
End of the day, the police are against this. Protesters are for it. They lay out all the cases. I'm going to predict no. What do you predict?
Again, police would have to be on board for it to even have a chance.
Is that how you feel?
I do, but I don't think it would unless they came out and really let us know they were on board with it.
Kathie Conway, you're somebody that deals with appropriations. Kansas City has had this idea to refurbish their airport. It's been said it's the first thing you see about Kansas City when you come, last thing when you leave. They had Burns and McDonnell, one of Missouri's top companies, came and worked on this idea. Then the mayor was for it, who very popular mayor, especially even in Jefferson City, very well highly thought of. Then some politics came involved. They stuck it to a Maryland company. It's an interesting thing to me how Missourians seem to think you're an expert just because you're not from Missouri.
I think we have a lot of experts in Missouri. Just ask them; they'll tell you. For me, I don't know all the intricacies of this. I don't know why they feel they need a new airport. I flew in and out of Kansas City for 12 years every week, perfectly content with that airport. I would like to always see Missouri come first. I would always like to see those companies get these kinds of bids and contracts. But again, I'm for the taxpayers always. So if someone can do it at a less cost, then I'm for that.
Peter Meredith, it's been an interesting thing. I mean, they worked this up. The mayor was for the Missouri company, but there seemed to be the folks in his last few months in office came out and took it away, changed the process, and now what they have to go to a public vote with some people from Maryland. Is it not just another case of, well, you got to be smarter because you're not from here?
I don't know. It looked to me more like a case, and this is from an outside St. Louisan's perspective, of just politics and people fighting with each other to get the deal that would make them look the best. And you ended up with a process that wasn't transparent and that has gotten more and more confusing as it's gone along.
I mean, when you look at how some of the cities have got themselves into some of these financial holes, some of these things, it usually comes with a slick-talking guy from the East Coast flying in with it's going to be wonderful, trust me. These guys are dumb, they're from here, I'm not from here. Is there a way that you could see the state going in and helping St. Kansas City accomplish their goal?
I don't see the state getting in, but it's supposed to be on their ballot in November. 12 out of their 14 councilmen supported it, and I kind of feel like, who am I from St. Louis to tell them how they want to do things over in Kansas City?
Well, folks in Jeff City always want to tell folks in St. Louis how to do things. But is there a way that you could see Kansas City coming to the state legislature in January and saying, hey, if this vote fails, which it'd almost be a stroke of great politics to have it succeed at this point, could they come and say, we want to do our airport, we're looking at Missouri companies? Could you see that conversation starting in Jefferson City?
Not at this time, not in the climate that we're in right now.
What if the budget goes way up? And there'd be a lot of folks at your door wanting that.
We have a lot of holes to dig out of before something like that would be on the table.
Let's take a bit talk about the U.S. Senate race. Something you've discussed running. I know there's
have.
folks calling you and taking your temperature on it. Any closer to making a decision?
I'm still thinking about it.
It's
very interesting.
Kathie Conway, I think a lot of folks, some of the old Grandy Tories have got together and anointed Josh Hawley. And another kind of faux pas this week about voting in the wrong spot that may be coming to an end. You wonder, is he serious about making this race?
I don't know. I've only spoken with him a few times. I don't really have a good feel for that. I think that it is more machinations in the background than perhaps something that he himself is
He
pursuing.
seems to actually want to be Attorney General.
I think he does.
I
and
think there was some truth to that he really wanted the job.
I agree. I agree.
So it's an interesting thing. As a Democrat, you have to be sitting back like, what's that gif of Michael Jackson watching popcorn, just loving seeing what's going on? I mean, these faux pas, it doesn't seem like a candidate's fully committed and engaged to doing this race. And maybe he knows that he can wait because he can raise money, but there just seems like something that's not fully committed here.
Absolutely. I think, the longer he stalls, the better.
So another thing is the governor was very critical of the then Attorney General Chris Koster in Ferguson. Well, now he's standing in the same broken glass in the same metropolitan area, and I don't hear him being critical of Josh Hawley, but I don't think the relationship is quite cozy there.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the current governor said of the past governor that had he been in that role, the protest would have been over by the second night. And it's pretty clear that has not happened in this case. He said that leaders would show up in St. Louis and stand strong. I haven't seen him stand with the protesters. I haven't seen him talk to the protesters and tell them what he's going to do to actually address their concerns. And I think it's a shame.
Quick prediction, would the governor's campaign promises of a curfew in the National Guard help this situation?
I don't believe so.
If he kept his promises, would it help the situation?
If he kept his promises?
Of the National Guard involved in a curfew, would that
Oh,
help?
no, absolutely not.
Would his campaign promises be effective in this situation of the National Guard and a curfew?
If it were necessary, yes.
Yes, I think it would.
Yeah, I think if he'd have came in Friday and said there wouldn't be the broken glass at least. Maybe it didn't help the situation, I don't know. But with a minute left to win the week.
I say law enforcement for the way that they handled all the situations.
Sure. Who won the week?
Governor Greitens for allowing First Amendment rights to happen in St. Louis, but keeping businesses and citizens safe.
I think it almost shows a good judgment if he didn't enact his campaign promises because he thought it would actually, once he learned the situation, everyone's critical of Jay Nixon, but that was a tough spot. And the governor's in a tough spot right now. And it could have went worse, right?
It could have been much worse, and he's allowing he's making judgments as things happen.
Sure. Who won the week?
The protesters. I mean, you have a far majority of peaceful, nonviolent protesters, a few agitators who broke some windows. I mean, we have more people arrested than windows that have been broken.
Who won the week?
I agree. Protest organizers. We saw organized, powerful protests that were nonviolent every day of this week, and they've been very successful.
I'll say someone everyone on this panel knows, former Senator Jolie Justice on the Kansas City Council, and I think she may not give them out, but I think she'll have some I told you so's that she deserves to give some people in Kansas City before long. And you don't have an I told you so because you join us next week, this week in Missouri Politics. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you by Spire and Sterling Bank.